So have you ever been just looking at a chord chart and just wondering, what do these things actually mean? How do I actually play this on my bass, and what do I do from there? How are these chords formed? How are they structured, etc.? Well, this is going to be a quick and interesting video for you, and the one that you want to watch, because I'm going to tell you all of that stuff, mainly focusing on how it applies to bass, but no matter what instrument you play, it is still very useful stuff to know. Also, if you don't know the notes on your fretboard yet, then watch the video that I've got, whichever way it is, that one or that one, where the card shows up for that video to learn the fretboard first, as that is a necessary step. I'm sorry for you bass players or guitarists if you're watching it as well. Learn that fretboard and then come back to me. But now, once you know the notes of your fretboard, or just your notes on whatever instrument, you probably know by now that a C triad is made out of the notes C, E, G, and that is the root or 1, although we tend to call it the root, the third of E, and the fifth, which is G. You can call it third, fifth, 3, 5, whatever, it doesn't really matter what you call it, as long as there's a strong root or 1, 3, 5, and that is all that you need to know about that. And that is a basic triad. We'd represent that as just C. Any triad or any major triad really that has no alterations to it will just be called whatever that chord name is. And we're starting on C, the root here, so that is just C, and it's as simple as that. But let's say we saw C7. Well, that would be made up of the notes C, E, G, B flat. And for you astute among you, you may also think, why isn't that a B natural on top? Why is it a B flat? Well, if we're calling it a C7 chord, that does imply a flat 7. If we called it C major 7, then it would have that B natural in. But since we're calling it C7, it implies that there is a flat 7 in that chord. And that's something which a lot of people do get hung up on and stuck over. If you don't know that, that is one of your top tips to take away from this. If it has 7 in the name and it doesn't have a major symbol, that can either be represented by the words maj, it could even just say major out fully, or a little triangle. You can think of it as an arrow pointing upwards, so it's major, essentially. If it hasn't got any of that, flat 7, which in the case of C is a B flat. The major 7 is obviously B natural, which is one semitone down from the root, except it's usually played up the octave. But with voicings and things, which we won't get into today, you can move all that stuff around anyway. So now we know what a C is, a C7 and a C major 7, what the differences are between those. And I do want to touch up now on the difference between a C2 and a C9, because essentially a C2 chord has the 1, 3, 5, but it also has a 2 in it as well. A C9 is different, although the same note up the octave, and you might wrongly assume that is the difference between that the ninth has to be an octave higher. With voicings and harmony, you could put the ninth below the root even, and you could have it in the same octave and treat it as a 2 almost, although it's a ninth, because a 9 chord will also have a 7 in it. You can see I played a 7 there, and this is the natural ninth, unless it says otherwise. If it just says 9, it's always going to be a natural 9. If it's sharp 9, raise it by a semitone. If it's flat 9, lower it by a semitone, and that's probably pretty self-explanatory. If you've got a flatter note, you lower it by a semitone. Sharp note, you raise it by a semitone. But yeah, the 9 chord implies that there is a 7 in there as well. A 2, that wasn't English, but a 2 chord has no 7 present. And an add 2 chord is pretty much the same as a 2 chord really. It's that basic triad. An add 9 is the same thing really. An add 2 and add 9 is the same thing, just a basic triad, add that. And you can apply all of this logic of flat stuff, sharp stuff, whatever number it is, amongst all chords. If we've got a G7 sharp 5, for instance, we've got that G7, but this 5 is going to be sharpened, so there we go, there's your G7 sharp 5. There is a PDF for all the basic stuff around C as well, if you do want to just get your fingers around that on bass, so I'll leave a link for that in the description. But yeah, if it's sharp 5, you take that 5th and you sharpen it. Go figure, really. It is sort of well adopted in how it works these days, with especially jazz chord notation. A lot of it makes sense, apart from, you know, people getting confused on that 7 not being a natural 7, it's a flat 7. There's one other thing also like this as well. If you've got a D minor 6 chord, that's a D minor 6, you can see it's got a minor 3rd on the bottom. If a chord's got minor in it, it's just that 3rd, you make it a flat 3. A D minor 6 has got a major 6 in it. You need to call it D minor 6 flat 6, or you can call it D minor 6 sharp 5. But you can't call it D minor 6 because D minor 6 has got the major 6 in it. And that's really just because it sounds better than the minor 6 and it sounds a nicer chord for most things. So D minor 6 has got the natural 6 in it, which is particularly confusing when the 7 is a flat 7 and then this minor 6 is not. You know, in a minor 7 chord, that is going to be the flat 7, but it's that 7 chord, but the 3rd is then flattened. So now we have an understanding of basic 7 chords, 2 chords, 9 chords, and this also does go up to 11 and 13. You won't see any of the numbers in between. You won't see an 8 chord, you won't see a 10 chord, you won't see a 12 chord, and you won't see a 14 chord. The reason why we don't do all of the notes further up is because, well, like your 8 and your 10 and your continuing on, is you've already got those accounted for as your 1, 3, 5, 6 and 7, so you don't need to do it again. And your 2 isn't accounted for, so that's why the 9th is a thing. But 11 and 13 chords just have those extra notes in as well. 11s have got 4s in and 13s have got 6 in up the octave. But it does imply that you've got all the notes beneath it, and that does have to apply. For a 9 chord, you've got a 7. For 11 chords, you've got a 9 and a 7. And for a 13 chord, you've got a 13, 11, a 9 and a 7. Also, if you're doing this over a major 7 chord, you won't really come across a major 11 chord. You'll get it listed as major 7 sharp 11. It's just the natural 11 clashes a little bit, so you'll see it as major 7 sharp 11. You won't really see it written as major 11. So if you're writing chords for things, don't write it out as major 11. If you want that 11th sound, you're going to want to write major 7 sharp 11 most of the time. If you do like the sound of a natural 11 major 7 chord, then by all means go for it, but traditionally it's usually and mostly actually a major 7 sharp 11 chord, and that's one slight discrepancy there when you're going up. But for minor 11 works great. Minor 13, great. The way chords are built traditionally in jazz, whatever note of the chord is going to be your root note, or whatever note the bass is usually playing. But I will come to one opportunity where that won't be the case, but I'll tell you a little bit about that afterwards, because they're slash chords, which you may have heard of as well. But yeah, your first number is your root note. If you have got nothing after that and it goes straight into a number, then you can assume it is a dominant 7, so a major triad with the 7, unless it says a 6 afterwards or a 2 afterwards. If the number is lower than 7, then you can't imply a dominant 7, but it will always be major if there's no indication of it being minor or diminished or half diminished or augmented, whatever, and they're represented with minuses. Half diminished can either be minor 7 flat 5, or it can be this little circle with a line in it, and diminished is just a circle, and augmented is written as a plus, again sort of up. And then obviously the major, which we talked about earlier, is that triangle. But yeah, you can always imply that it's going to be major if it doesn't have a number. If it has a minus, it's minor. If it has a circle, it's diminished. If it has a circle with a line in it, it's half diminished. If it has a plus afterwards, then it is augmented. And that's all to do with the placement of the 5th, really, for those diminished, half diminished, augmented chords. But they've got some extra things in them. I will leave them in the PDF, but I won't go into how those chords are formed in great structure, really. But diminished has a flattened 5 in it, as well as the minor 3rd. So a diminished chord implies it's minor anyway, but because of the flat 5, it's diminished rather than minor. And a diminished chord has got a natural 6 in it rather than a flat 7, although strictly it is a doubly flat 7, but it is the same note as the natural 6. Augmented chords as that sharp 5 can be written as a sharp 5, or it can be written as an augmented. Either do the same thing. But either way, then your next thing after your note is your minus, or your triangle or whatever, which tells you if the note is minor, major, diminished, etc., or just that sort of dominant shape, provided the number is larger than 7. Then if you've got 7s, 9s, 11s and 13s, it will imply all the notes are in the chord beneath it as well. Like if you've got a 13, it's got to have an 11 in it, it's got to have a 9 in it, and it's got to have the 7 in it. And this is all in traditional terms. With voicings and whatnot, you can remove certain notes. There's just stacks of thirds aren't always the most pleasant of things, but that is one way that you can go through it, and it's how the chords are traditionally structured. If you wanted to tell someone what all the notes in a C minor 11 chord, then you'd list all of them going up, although strictly most people won't voice them all into your chords, and you don't have to either. And then your note, or your number after the number, if there's any extra information, we'll just tell you a little bit more. Like if it's a 7 sharp 9 chord, if it's a C7 sharp 9, we've got that C7, and there's your sharp 9 there. And it's sort of an altered sound. Alters is another thing you get, although we won't be getting into that today either. Either way, there's a lot of things, but if you know that basic, dominant 7 is your flat 7, your major 7 is going to have a natural 7 in it, and you know your difference between your 9 and your 2, etc., etc., then you're definitely on the right track to interpreting all of this. And obviously, I've got the PDF for the notes of all this basic stuff anyway. I've stacked them all up like chords. I haven't written them out as you'd be walking them, but I've just written all the notes in just a little line for you, and then you can do what you will. I do need to talk about slash chords as well, and also feel free to leave any comments down below if you have anything that you feel like I've missed and you want your questions to be answered, as I'll definitely answer them for you. So let's take an example of a very basic slash chord for this example, and it works with anything. It's C over E. So we're going to have a C triad, but in the bass we're going to have a E, and I'm playing this low E because it's basically, it just is always below it with a slash chord. So if you're looking at your chord chart and it says C over E, play an E, don't play a C. The C will still work and sound fine, but if it's a C over E, play that root note there, because that's essentially saying it's a C7 chord, but there is a bass note of an E, and that's all really just an inversion of C, because it's its third. Its third's been put on the bottom now, although the third is present in the triad as well further up. But sometimes you might just do E and then root fifth and have that going over, and it spells out the triad nicely as well. Either way, with a slash chord, whatever the note under the slash is, think of it as a fraction. Your top number there is just whatever the chord on top is, and then your bit as the bass player is the bit underneath, and it's usually just one note, although you can have fully fleshed out chords over chords, but it tends to be like, if we take C7 over D, it won't really be C7 over D7, for example. But yeah, that is all I have to say about chords. Again, if you have any questions and you feel like there's something I've missed, or you feel like I've gone over something a bit too quickly for you, because I do have to fit this all into one video after all, then comment down below what your questions are, and I'll be very happy to answer them for you. So that is all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you don't know how to learn your fretboard yet, then go watch that video. I'll even tag it a second time for you. I'll be nice. I might even put it in the description if I remember to do that. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.